Enemy raids were being predicted hours before radar detected anything, and no one understood how, except for the RAF officer who had uncovered a secret weather trick hidden high in the sky. Pilots scrambled while the horizon still looked calm, engines already warming even though no enemy was in sight, and commanders positioned fighters with an accuracy that felt almost supernatural. Germany's bombers had not yet crossed the French coast, yet Britain was already preparing for them. What made those moments eerie was the silence. No contrails streaked the sky, no drone of engines rolled across the channel, nothing suggested danger, yet orders arrived with sharp, unwavering certainty. Crews whispered about new technology, intercepted messages, or some new classified radar breakthrough, but the truth was far stranger. High above the coastline, faint, trembling ripples shimmered through the upper atmosphere, distortions created unintentionally by the Luftwaffe's tight bomber formations long before the aircraft themselves appeared. Almost invisible to the untrained eye, they carried a signature of what was coming hours ahead of time. Once recognized, they became an early warning system the enemy never knew they were providing. For a short, remarkable period, this hidden atmospheric clue allowed the RAF to stay steps ahead of every major raid, turning the sky itself into Britain's most reliable alarm. Keep watching, because the origin of those ripples reveals how the RAF suddenly began outmaneuvering a force convinced it could not be seen. In the early years of the air war over Britain, timing meant survival. Radar was still in its adolescence, impressive for its era but far from perfect. Chain-home towers stretched along the coast, pulsing their signals into the sky, yet their reach had limits. They struggled with altitude detection, suffered from interference, and left large swaths of airspace where incoming formations could slip through unnoticed until they were dangerously close. Every minute lost meant fighter squadrons launching late, climbing too slowly, or intercepting bombers only after they had already struck their targets. Inside this fragile defense network operated a group few considered tactically important: the weather units. Forecasters mapped pressure systems, tracked wind shear, and measured humidity layers because aviators needed the information, not because anyone imagined it could change the course of a battle. The meteorologists worked quietly at scattered stations across southern England, filing reports no one outside their field ever studied in depth. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe relied on massive, tightly packed formations when crossing the Channel. These clusters created enormous disturbances through the atmosphere, pressure shifts, temperature fluctuations, and turbulence patterns. But to most observers, such details were irrelevant background noise. They were not seen as a source of intelligence, nor as anything that could be used to detect a raid. Yet the gaps in radar coverage, the urgency of early warnings, and the overlooked data collected by weather officers were about to converge. The stage was set for a discovery no one had expected, one that would momentarily give Britain a new advantage. The discovery emerged not from a laboratory or briefing room, but from the quiet concentration of Lieutenant Arthur Harwood, a young RAF meteorologist stationed near the coast. Harwood was meticulous in a way his colleagues both admired and teased. He compared every balloon sounding, every upper air chart, every contrail observation with a precision bordering on obsession. It was during one of these late-night reviews that he noticed a peculiar pattern, elongated dips in upper-altitude pressure that appeared hours before the Luftwaffe's largest raids. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence. Weather could be unruly and deceptive, and atmospheric anomalies often meant nothing. But as he cross-checked multiple raids over several weeks, the alignment grew too precise to ignore. Each major bombing formation seemed to send a faint disturbance ahead of itself, a subtle compression wave that raced through the upper atmosphere faster than the aircraft producing it. Harwood layered sortie data, pilot reports, and instrument readings onto transparent charts. One by one, the pieces fell into place. The ripples were not meteorological quirks, they were signatures. The Luftwaffe's tight formations pushed a pressure front upward, creating a narrow, detectable band long before the first enemy aircraft touched Channel airspace. Unsure whether anyone would take him seriously, Harwood presented his findings to Air Defense Command. Skepticism was immediate, but curiosity followed. Trials were authorized, observers were briefed, instruments were recalibrated. And then the first test arrived, confirming Harwood's theory with unnerving accuracy, hours before radar detected anything at all. Watch to find out how this discovery was turned into an operational advantage. Once Harwood's findings were validated, the RAF implemented the method quietly, almost cautiously, as though acknowledging it too openly might cause it to vanish. Weather stations along the coast were instructed to take upper air readings with greater frequency, paying special attention to the narrow altitude band where Harwood had identified the pressure distortions. Instruments were recalibrated to catch the slightest deviation, and observers were trained to recognize the faint shift in readings that signaled an approaching formation. Reconnaissance pilots contributed as well. During routine flights, they watched for unusual bends in high-altitude haze and sudden, unnatural movements in thin cirrus layers. Even subtle changes in how contrails drifted or sheared across the sky were noted and relayed back to command. These small cues, once dismissed as ordinary atmospheric quirks, now formed the backbone of an early warning system that relied on the Luftwaffe's own flight behavior. When a distortion was detected, Harwood issued coded alerts to sector controllers. Fighter squadrons moved into holding patterns before radar screens showed anything unusual. Anti-aircraft crews calibrated their guns early, plotted likely approach lines, and prepared ammunition stacks long before being officially told to stand by. To crews on the ground, it felt as though the RAF had suddenly gained a new sense, a way of feeling the enemy's presence before the enemy arrived. Interception times improved. Engagements took place farther from populated areas. Pilots reported arriving at the fight with rare precision, and through it all, the Luftwaffe had no idea the sky itself was giving them away. For several critical weeks, the results were unmistakable. Fighter squadrons were airborne earlier, positioned more intelligently, and intercepting bomber streams with a consistency that surprised even seasoned commanders. Bombers that once slipped through gaps in radar coverage now found Hurricanes and Spitfires waiting at precisely the right altitude and angle. Ground crews noticed the change too. Fewer frantic scrambles, more coordinated launches, and a growing sense that the RAF had finally seized a small but meaningful edge. German intelligence grew suspicious. Reports from returning crews spoke of uncanny British timing, as though the RAF somehow anticipated their routes before they crossed the channel. Some Luftwaffe officers speculated that radar had improved, while others suspected code-breaking or insider leaks. Yet none imagined that their own formations were generating atmospheric signatures readable from miles away. But the method was fragile. As winter arrived, the atmosphere became turbulent, scattering the pressure waves and making them harder to detect. Later, when the Luftwaffe shifted to staggered formations and mixed altitudes, the once clear signatures blurred into noise. The advantage faded, not because the discovery was flawed, but because war evolved faster than nature could cooperate. Still, for a brief window, Britain possessed a form of early warning no one could have predicted. One drawn not from machines or spies, but from the sky itself. Watch to find out why this remarkable trick disappeared into classified files for decades, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold battlefield secrets. The weather-based early warning system did not vanish because it failed, but because it depended on conditions that rarely stayed stable for long. Atmospheric layers shifted with the seasons, introducing turbulence that scattered the delicate pressure waves before they reached the coast. What had once been a sharp, readable signal evolved into fragmented patterns that even Harwood struggled to interpret with confidence. At the same time, British radar rapidly advanced. New stations filled gaps, altitude detection improved, and electronic interference became easier to manage. Compared to these dependable systems, a fleeting atmospheric indicator felt too delicate to rely on during life or death engagements. There was also the matter of secrecy. Command understood that if the Luftwaffe discovered the phenomenon, it could simply alter its formations, change altitudes, or stagger bomber groups to eliminate the signature entirely. By keeping the method buried in weather logs and technical reports, the RAF protected the advantage for as long as nature allowed. After the war, as technological progress overshadowed improvised techniques, the story faded into archives, its significance recognized only by those who watched it work in real time. In retrospect, Harwood's discovery demonstrated an unexpected truth. Even in an age defined by machines, the natural world still held clues that could tip the balance. For a short span of time, a faint ripple in the sky provided Britain with something priceless: foreknowledge. And though the method was eventually replaced by more reliable tools, its legacy endures as a reminder of how innovation often emerges from the most overlooked corners of the battlefield.